Egypt. But anyway, Laird has done some brilliant work with the Dogon. He's a software designer from Albany, New York, a scholar on African and Egyptian cosmology and language. He really takes us to better understand language and better understand the ancient wisdom embedded in language. Will you please welcome Laird Scranton?
Hello, everyone. I'm Laird Scranton. I'm Laird Scranton, and my field of study is comparative cosmology. And you probably all already know that cosmology in modern terms is the study of the creation of the universe and of the creation of matter. When we talk about ancient cosmology, they also include the study of the creation and formation of life. And so it's really just a broader sense of what creation constitutes. And I consider this to be a very timely subject because we see creation, themes of creation turning up in the headlines every day now. For example, how in creation did Sarah Palin become the Republican nominee for vice president? So my goal here today is to give you a little more background on the Dogon, who they are, and why I consider them to be important to the study of ancient knowledge. Walter already mentioned that they are a little African tribe from Mali, and you can see Mali up on the diagram up there. It's located in the bulge of northwest Africa. The Dogon themselves live in sort of a remote location along the cliffs south of the Niger River and north of Upper Volta. They're very difficult to get to. But I think the choice of location was established in the 1500s when they were trying to flee enforced conversion to Islam. And they picked it as a way of preserving a tradition that they felt was important. This is a picture of what their typical village looks like along the Bandiagara escarpment. They live in a Sahelian environment, which is typically consists of 3 months of rainfall, followed by the remainder of the year being dry. And they eke out sort of a subsistence level existence, growing onions and producing artworks. They're famed for carved granary doors and gate locks. They create jewelry, they do metalwork, and they're important to the study of ancient knowledge because they preserve a very detailed cosmology that is cast in the symbols and themes and myths of all the ancient cosmologies, the classic ancient cosmologies, such as those of ancient Egypt, ancient Buddhism, and other cultures. They also preserve civic traditions that are very reminiscent of ancient Egypt. Oftentimes, I've reached a point where I felt that if the Dogon do it, you can pretty much predict that the ancient Egyptians did it. They observe the same calendars, similar ritual holidays, and things like that. They're also important because they express their rituals often in the same way as ancient Judaism. They wear skull caps and prayer shawls. They circumcise. They celebrate a Jubilee year. So as far removed as they are physically from the traveled roads of civilization, they're that closely integrated with the traditional avenues of classic religions and cosmologies. Okay, the Dogon became controversial in the 1970s when Robert Temple wrote a book called The Serious Mystery. And his book focused on some unexpected astronomic knowledge that the Dogon seemed to have. The Dogon seemed to understand that the star Sirius, which you see as the brightest star in the night sky, did not constitute a single star, but rather represented at least two stars, a dwarf star that orbits with a larger sun-like star, and a third body that may be a star or that may be a planet. Robert Temple's book focused on this information as a possible evidence of an alien contact, and so it became very controversial and stirred up a lot of interest in the 1970s. What we know about the Dogon, we know from anthropological studies conducted over a 30-year period by two very well-known French anthropologists, Marcel Griaule and his student Germain Dieterlen. And they and their crews visited with the Dogon off and on through the 1930s, 40s, and 50s up until the time of Griaule's sudden death in 1956. And during that time, they gained the confidence of the Dogon people and the Dogon priests. And Griaule was very prone to asking penetrating questions about some of the more difficult aspects of the cosmology, and eventually reached a point where he was initiated into the Dogon esoteric tradition. The person who chose to initiate him was a gentleman by the name of Ogatameli, a blind hunter who was a priest and who sought permission from a tribal council to go ahead and initiate Griaule. The way the Dogon tradition works is, theoretically, it's open to anybody who wants to study it, providing that they study it in an orderly fashion. If I were to go to a Dogon priest and ask a question that the priest felt that was commensurate with my initiated status, the priest is obligated to tell me a truthful answer. If I ask a question that's deemed to be out of order to my initiated status, he's required either to remain silent or to lie. So Griaule spent the amount of time necessary to pursue these inquiries in an orderly way, and when he reached a point where he was encroaching on what was traditionally secret knowledge, Ogatameli went to the tribal council and said, "What do I do here? You know, theoretically I'm supposed to tell this guy the truth." And the tribal council said, "Yes, go ahead. We give you permission to tell him the secrets, but we want to be reported back to every evening as to what you've told him and how he responded to it and so forth." And Griaule wrote a book called it's got God of Water in French. It's Conversations with Ogatameli in English, which is a diary of his 33 days of instruction as an initiate in the religion. And then after Griaule's death, Germain Dieterlen finished the anthropological study of the Dogon religion in both their names, called The Pale Fox. Okay, as Robert Temple's book became more popular, more controversial, mainstream scientists were upset at the suggestion of an alien contact, and popular scientist Carl Sagan suggested that the Dogon had acquired their knowledge about the stars of Sirius from some modern visitor who, modern science from the early 1900s had understood this information about the stars of Sirius, and so Sagan was postulating that a visitor had told it to the Dogon, and the Dogon had just incorporated it into their cosmology. But unfortunately, what Carl Sagan didn't realize is that the Dogon expressed their cosmology using what are essentially ancient Egyptian words. And part of what I've done in my studies is to trace these words from the Dogon language to the Egyptian language, and to demonstrate, based on multiple meanings, that the words are the same. And the way the Dogon words work is that typically a Dogon cosmological word will carry at least two levels of meaning, and the meanings are disconnected from each other, logically disconnected from each other, so that you can't reasonably derive one from the other. And so if you can demonstrate that the same pronunciation existed in ancient Egypt, along with those same two disconnected meanings, and perhaps associated with a common symbol, then you have enough evidence to make a case that the word is really an Egyptian word. Other researchers haven't seen this before because the Dogon language is really a composite of many different sublanguages, and unless you're particularly specifically looking at the cosmological words, you might not ever notice that they were really Egyptian words. Okay, in the 1980s, a second wave of anthropologists visited the Dogon, led by Belgian